Everybody, and welcome to Stadia. We're going to be working this contract, but while we do that, we're going to talk about Farming Simulator 22 and dive deep into the information we know to date. Before we do that, this video is sponsored by Chris Miller. Chris Miller is a Farm Baron member of the Farmer Klein YouTube channel. Thank you, Chris. So, Farming Simulator 22, we do know that it will be released sometime in Q4 of 2021. So that is October, November, or December of this year. We also know that Farming Simulator 22 is going to be released on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X. So pretty much all of the platforms, the new current gen and the previous generation, PC and Mac, and Google Stadia, or as long as Google keeps it alive, I guess. Now, something else to note is Giants will be self-publishing this game. So prior to Farm Sim 22, Giants had partnered with Focus Home Interactive to be the game publisher, whereas Giants solely focused on basically being the game developer. But for Farm Sim 22, Giants is going to take on both roles and act as both game developer and game publisher. What does that mean? Well, game publishing involves all the processes to get the game to market. So Giants is going to need to establish business agreements with physical distributors, companies to print, manufacture, and ship their physical media, if they're even going to have physical media. Giants will also need to be responsible for marketing the game, as well as basically forming digital distribution agreements with companies like Steam, Epic, Sony, Microsoft. And Giant Software is now basically in full control of Farming Simulator 22. Also means they're full control of their profits. So no doubtedly, Giants had to share some profit with Focus Home Interactive. Will this lead to lower game costs, lower DLC costs? Will it lead to increased game and DLC costs? Hard to know at this point. But we will have to definitely keep our eye out for when pre-sales are announced. Have an idea of what this game is going to cost now that Giants is self-publishing. The blog post goes on to say that be prepared for new crops, new maps, plural, new machines, and new brands. Speculation begin on what those new crops might be and where these new maps might be based. We do have a little bit of a hint on at least one of those maps here coming up in some of the screenshots that have already been released showing Farm Sim 22. In total, more than 400 machines, implements, and tools from over 100 brands. As a frame of reference, Farm Sim 19, when it was released, they advertised over 300 machines, implements, and tools. Looking at a recent webarchive.org web crawl of the Farming Simulator website, and Farm Sim 19 included 110 brands specifically. In addition to new crops, multiple maps, brands, machines, for the first time ever, Farming Simulator will include in its base game what they're calling seasonal cycles. And other new features will be announced later, they said. I find it interesting. Giants is saying they're including seasonal cycles. Why are they not calling it seasons? Everyone knows what seasons is. Then they're calling it season cycles. I'm kind of thinking this might be, this is me thinking as a player, kind of thinking this might be kind of a Seasons Light implementation, where it is not necessarily fully featured and maybe has some functions that you can toggle on and off. Like in the game now, you can toggle on and off plowing, lime, and weeds. I am thinking quite possibly you'll be able to toggle off the seasonal effects. But if you want to play with those seasonal effects, and maybe you want to play a little bit more realistically, possibly there will be a, again, speculation, maybe a add-on that you can add to bring in some extra functionality within the seasonal changes that they list. So an example would be maybe referencing like base game fertilizing and lime, and how that could be the light version, and using precision farming could be a more advanced or a more pro version of thinking about lime and fertilizer. Farm Sim 22 will once again run on the Giants engine, but it is being revamped in Farm Sim 22. Right now, Giants engine is version 8. Farm Sim 22 is going to be version 9. Now, the blog post lists enhanced AI, richer worlds, and enhanced mechanical sounds from vehicles varying on engine load, for example. So, like here, crawling up this hill, we would have a deeper engine note as it was working harder coming up the hill in Farm Sim 22. Now, some other changes is that Farm Sim 22 will make use of DX12 as opposed to Farm Sim 19, which utilized the aging DX11. What this brings is better support for high core count processors. The players with 6, 8, or more CPU cores can take better advantage of all that power. Their CPUs with DX12 much more than they can with DX11. Other enhancements include texture streaming, which is where textures are loaded in real time as they are needed versus loading all the textures in advance. Reading up about this feature, it has been attributed to significant performance increase in gameplay, i.e. frame rates. Occlusion culling. Now this was an interesting one. Occlusion culling is another new feature that's listed in the Giants blog post. And when you hear what it does, it just sounds so simple. But apparently up until Farm Sim 22 wasn't implemented. So in Farm Sim 19 and before, there's a function called draw distance, where basically everything in game has a draw distance. If you're within that draw distance, the object is rendered. If you're away from that, far enough away that you're beyond that draw distance, the object doesn't render. We've all seen this, where you're driving and then all of a sudden off in the distance you see a building pop in. It wasn't there before, it was invisible, then it pops in. Well, with Farm Sim 22, occlusion culling is where the game disables the rendering of objects when they are not currently seen by the player camera, because they are obscured, occluded by other objects. So for example here, we can't see anything other than this hillside. Nothing beyond it because of our view. Well, with draw distance, lots of stuff beyond that hillside is still being rendered. You can't see it, but it's still being rendered. With occlusion culling, the stuff beyond that hillside isn't rendered. the game knows what the camera can see and only renders what the camera can see. What an ingenious idea, right? Now the next one is kind of a big word, and I'll be quite honest, there's lots of words in this that go so far over my head, they might as well be in the stroposphere. Temporal anti-aliasing, or TAA. I've also seen it called TXAA. What that does, according to Wikipedia, is seeks to reduce or remove the effects of temporal aliasing. Well, what's temporal aliasing? I don't know. Temporal aliasing is caused by the sampling rate, i.e. the number of frames per second, of a scene being too low compared to the transformation speed of objects inside the scene. So if your game is rendering at 60 frames per second, but something within the scene is moving at a rate higher than 60 frames per second, then you get this temporal aliasing. So an example has been used like the rotation of this harvester gather wheel, or the rotation of the tires on a tractor as you're driving down the road. The rotation will speed up, and at some point the rotational speed of those tires begins to exceed the frame rate of the scene. And well, if the frame rate, the tires and the frame rate of the scene match, then your wheels will appear as if they're not moving. They're not spinning. They appear stationary. But if you slow down, then you'll see them spin faster again. So this goes on to say, this causes objects to appear to jump or appear at a location instead of giving the impression of smoothly moving towards them. Avoid anti-aliasing artifacts altogether. Shutter behavior of the sampling system, the game camera, strongly influences aliasing, as the overall shape of the exposure over time determines the band limiting of the system applied to the camera. Yeah, like I said, a bunch of confusing big words. But basically, the gist is, with all of these enhancements to Farm Sim 22, to provide a foundation, as they say in the blog post, for more complex mods. I'm thinking that means like more moving parts, more animations, more triangles, so more smoother looking mods. And we see things like, if I can zoom in close enough, something that's round, maybe it doesn't look round, it kind of looks a little octagonish. There's a number of polygons. You can increase the number of polygons to make things that are round look rounder, as well as improving slot count on consoles. Console players, sorry guys, slot counts are still a thing. But you might have more slots, or things might take less slots than they used to take. We'll just have to wait and see how all that pans out. Now that's enough talking about the blog post. Let's dive into some work in progress screenshots. Now it's important to remember all of these screenshots are work in progress. It's not final rendering. This is not a final game. What you see is not what you're going to get in Q4, but is a kind of a sampling of what could become, only likely better. So the first shot we're going to take a look at here is of what appears to be a new cow pen. From this image we can see multiple types of cows, and for the Holsteins we can see at least two different color patterns. So on the right over here, if we zoom in, we're going to see that we've got basically three cows on the right. Two of the cows basically have the same color pattern. Third cow does not. So there's going to be at least two different color patterns for our Holsteins. Now if we take a look here at the cow in the center of the frame, you can see that we have a totally different model than we had for our cows in Farm Sim 19. In fact, if you look real close at the hide, you can see hairs. Now, in a moment, we're going to compare a Farm Sim 19 cow to this Farm Sim 22 cow. But before we do that, I just get a chuckle every time I look at this cow's eyelashes. I don't know why it makes me laugh so much. At any rate, here we have a side-by-side look at the FS19 cow and the FS22 cow. See that the hide on the FS19 cow looks a bit more maybe leathery, a bit less with the hair, a bit less fur. Take also a look at the grass in the screenshot for Farm Sim 19 versus the grass in the screenshot of Farm Sim 22. Something else that has been a little bit of interest amongst some circles that I've basically talked to and looked at today has been, what is the crop over here on the right side of the image? I'm thinking it looks like it's potatoes. Basically, during the growth stage where they kind of have a flower on the top, kind of looks like potatoes. But could this be our very first glance at what could be a new crop? Some folks have speculated this could be a white flowering clover. Might be more hopeful thinking than anything else, but interested in what your take is on what this crop could possibly be. Now, in the second image, we have a new bent katana forage harvester chopping corn. Things that stand out to me are the dark, rich soil color and the corn stalks that the forage harvester is chaffing. Also, if we take a look at the ground, we can see that we've got the cut corn stalks and the chaff scattered around on the ground. All of that looks really nice. I really like how that is. And if we zoom on into the cab, we have our first look at what might be new player models for your virtual farmers. This particular guy here either appears to be bald, or maybe he's just wearing a skin-colored cap. The next screenshot seems to be from an American map or some other location that basically uses double yellow lines to represent the middle of a road. I'm just going to be thinking that it's kind of an American map, because if we look at the John Deere, we'll also see that it has an orange warning sign on the back. Again, something that we typically see on American farm equipment. One of the standout things to this image is the harvested texture of what looks like a small grain, possibly wheat. And there's a really nice cultivated texture behind the Vanderstand cultivator, where we have the plant material being mixed in with the soil. We still have dynamic hoses. They continue to be a thing here with respect to Farm Sim 22, as we can see the hoses hooked up to the John Deere tractor. Again, with the American style warning placard on the back. Here we can also see what looks like another different player model. This time, he's wearing a green hoodie. Now, Farm Sim 19, we could change the color of our player's plaid shirt. We could give him a vest, sunglasses, and we had a branded hat. Now, I'm thinking, this guy's driving a John Deere tractor. He's wearing a green hoodie. What are the chances? Hear me out. What are the chances that this hoodie might have a John Deere branding logo on the front? What would you think of that? You could dress your virtual farmer in a brand specific hoodie or some other outfit. In the previous video, or in the previous image, you saw the guy wearing a different shirt than this. I think that's pretty cool. We're getting more customization in our virtual farmers. Looking at the background image, we can see some more of those wonderful multicolored flowers from the Erlengrot map, as well as what looks like maybe a large mill cell point through some of the foliage and trees back behind the tractor. Now the next image shows a new Massey Ferguson 8S265 tractor pulling a Kuhn seeder. See the direct seed functionality here. So once again, we can take a good look at the small grain harvested texture, but also the rich, deep earth color of the seeded texture. This must be a European map. And then back off behind the seeder, see a power pole or a phone line in the background up on the hill. All seriousness aside, in the background we also can see some nice water, maybe a small pond or a river, and maybe a little hint of a barn or a cell point off in the distance. Now this picture with the harvester shows a nice mid-sized New Holland CH7.70. And I've heard some players saying when they saw this photo, they were hopeful that Giants was going to have more mid-size harvesters in the base game lineup. Right now it seems to be pretty heavy with the high-end harvesters. We also are seeing what might be a new wheat texture, or maybe a new small grain crop also being harvested. Other things to note on this image is we have an observation tower on the right, as well as a good shot with partially cloudy sky. Overall, looking at these images, I get the feel that the clouds are looking a lot better in Farm Sim 22 so far. Now the final breakdown that we're going to take a look at is of 4 seasonal images showing us spring, summer, autumn, and winter from the same perspective. Here it's spring, and we have a nice light green foliage as well as grass. See a little stream or creek running under a small footbridge off in the distance. In summer, you can see that the foliage has progressed. It's turned darker green, and we can see the shadows have now changed. The sun is now in a different perspective, different position. The shadows on the ground and on the trees have now changed. We progress into autumn. The leaves have changed. Crop is ready, and we now have what looks like a very nice sunrise or sunset off in the background. And finally, we move into the winter scene. We can see much more area that was previously hidden behind all the trees and the bushes. The stream is now covered in snow, which is new to Farm Sim 22, as in Farm Sim 19. I have not seen snow actually cover map water in the past. You can also see a few barns. One on the left has a small side door that appears to be open, and a zoomed in image barn in the middle. Both upper and lower doors are open. Now if we scroll all the way over to the left, we look off in the distance, zoomed all the way in. You can see a small road bridge. And then we can see what looks like a fuel station just past the small barn. And then we have our new possibly farm silo model. Got the big red barn again, the two open doors, and then a metallic looking harvest door silo beside that. A little further back we see maybe possibly a bit of a small town or other industrial area. And then the last building that we see here on the side, could that be the opposite side of the cow barn we saw in the first image? Or could the building be used for something else? Maybe it's a large chicken coop. Something we haven't had in Farm Sim 19 was big industrial chicken farming. Either way, we can see what looks like a large ventilation fan on the side. It's going to need some form of ventilation. So guys, that is going to do us for today in our deep dive into everything we know about Farm Sim 22 at this point. Over the coming weeks and months, we will surely learn a lot more is coming in Farm Sim 22. And until next time, happy farming.